go do the next question. Okay, question 4. This is where the real fun begins. We are now going to start creating our own modules that we can import. And that's really interesting and useful because we're going to probably write lots of code at some point for one of our own projects, and we're going to want to separate the kind of the logic from the run, just so it's a bit tidier. So the reason we're doing this is really just so we can make our code a bit more compartmentalized and a bit easier to interpret later. So basically, as our code grows, we really do want to separate our logic into modules. Okay, it's probably not terribly important right now, but in the future, again, you will thank me for this, I hope. So we're going to create a file called seek utils. So basically, utilities for sequences, and we're going to again do our reversed complement and transcribe. I'm going to write them as functions, and then we're going to write a second script called main.py that uses those, right? In fact, I'm not going to call it main.py. I'm probably going to call it question, what are we on? 4.py. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's go over to our Visual Code. I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to create two new files, one called q4.py and another one called sequtils. Okay, so they're separate files, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write all of the code that I need to do my reverse complement and my transcription. And I'm going to do that as two functions, one called revcomp and the other one called transcribe. So let's just have a bit of a descriptor at the top here. Utility functions for working with DNA sequences. And that's always good practice to put at the top of any file. Get rid of that. Just so whoever opens the file knows what that file is relating to. I am going to create two functions here. The first one is going to be reverse or rev underscore comp. That's going to take a sequence, which will be a string. And I am just going to return none right now. That will just give me nothing. And then I'll write the code in a sec. I want a second function called def transcribe. And that is going to take, again, a sequence. And again, return none to begin with. Right? So nothing is going to happen if I run this. Nothing at all. Okay? I haven't done anything yet. I've just created the skeleton of my file and my functions. So let's do a reverse complement function. The first thing I'm going to do is put a doc string in there to say what the function is going to do. This is simply going to return the reverse complement of a DNA sequence. Right, how do we do that? We've done this before. I'm going to define a variable called sequence. Actually, I'm feeding the sequence in, but I want to update it. I just want to make sure it's completely uppercase to begin with. And then here's the bit where I want to create mapping of base complements. So remember, I want to convert A's to T's and C's to G's. Now, I can't remember how I did this last time, but I'm going to do it in a slightly different way. So I'm going to create a variable called complement equals str make trans. We'll discuss this function in a second. And I'm going to basically map A, T, C, and G to, let me figure this out, T, A, G, and C. Okay? Right, let's just discuss this make trans table. So these are quite powerful string tools, which is why they're on the string module. So all it's doing is in one line rather than having to look some sort of lookup table. It's just mapping every character in turn onto this one. Okay, we don't really need to go any deeper here. Just remember that this is how you do it. And what that will do is it will create a variable called complement, which basically contains a lookup table that we're going to use rather than having to define one explicitly. The last thing we're going to do here is we're going to use another string. So we're going to another string function called translate. So I'm going to create. Actually, I'm just going to return it. I'm just going to return this now. So what I'm going to return here is my reverse complement, which will be the sequence dot translate, and then I'm going to put in complement. Right, now let me just unpack that. So what I'm doing here is I'm calling my sequence. I'm hitting it with an inbuilt function, inbuilt string function called translate, and I'm going to feed this complement table of my mappings into it so it knows how to change all of the characters in my sequence. Okay, so that will essentially give me the complement, but I also want to reverse it. So for me, that is a no-brainer. I always use colon -1 to reverse, and this function now will reverse the will return the reverse complement. And let me just return the okay, let's do it. Apply mapping and return reverse. Okay, right, so there's my reverse complement function. I need another function for transcribe. Now the transcribe function is even simpler than that. All we were doing with transcribe was we're converting DNA to RNA, right? Let me write that in. Convert DNA to RNA. So I've actually started with the harder function, because all I need to do when I just transcribe is simply return seek upper dot replace. Now, because I'm only flipping two characters round, or one character round, I'm converting all T's to U's. That's it. I could have done something like this, but it would have been a hammer to crack a nut. Okay, so that's just going to, with a single line, return the sequence which has been converted to uppercase and has had all of its T's replaced with U's. And that's it. That's all I wanted to do in my cqtils.py. And again, if I run it, nothing will happen. Here's the fun bit. Here's the bit we're going to actually solve our problem. And I need to remind myself what the problem was. Write a script that imports cqtils and calls both functions. Right, so I haven't called it main.py. I've called it question 4. So what I want to do here is I want to demonstrate in this file using functions from cqtils.py. And I'm going to create a variable called DNA, which will be my DNA sequence, ATGCGTACCTGA, doesn't matter what it's called. And what I want to do now is import. In fact, what I should do, you should make all of your import statements at the very top. So I'm going to import cqtils. There it is. And if you've done it right and it's in the same folder that you're working in, it should find it. Now there's a couple of ways I can do this. As I showed you in the last video, I could have done it as su cqtils, and I can then use su as my module name with a dot afterwards to call any methods or functions that are in there. I am going to just leave it like that. Okay, so we'll call it explicitly. So the first thing I wanted to do is I'm going to print out the original sequence, and that's just DNA. Then I'm going to print reverse complement, correct. Okay, at this point I'm going to call cqtils dot, and if I've done this right, I spelled utils wrong. UTI, there it is. Dot. There you are. If I put the dot in, it immediately recommends the functions that are in that module. So I'm going to call revcomp. I'm going to put my DNA in, and then the last one I'm going to print the RNA transcript as well. Okay. Seek utils dot transcribe. Throw my DNA variable in there. Let's just tidy this up a bit. I don't think I need spaces. Let's run it. See what happens. There we go. Right, so you now know how to create a completely separate Python file which will store useful functions and then use them in some other script file. And what I've got, I hope you'll appreciate here, is this file looks pretty simple, right? It's just 4 lines, but I'm doing a lot. I haven't got this and where is it? This all in one. Okay, and that's really, really nice when you're writing extended code, because you don't want to be having to scroll through or get distracted by all of the code you've already written. You want to look at the business end of what you're trying to achieve, which is this. Furthermore, for anyone that you're trying to pass on your code to, you don't want them really to get frustrated and confused by all of the logic stuff that you've written. You just want them to be able to use these functions and not worry about it, like we do for everything pretty much. So if you import seekutils, they're not really going to go and dive into that and question everything you've done. They're just going to trust that your script's going to run, provided you've told them how to use it. Anyway, I'm ranting. So that's an important concept that I need you to learn. Let's go on to the next question.